for the Senior Bowl. And, I think we're all guilty of this. When we go to an event and we get caught up, somebody plays real well, and it's the buzz. And you've got to put something into that, some credibility into all these guys being down there. And they were the flavor of the week was Jaxson Dart. We already know he's good. How do you, as someone who's done this for 25 years, how do you balance him playing well in practice? I guess the interviews went well and so on. How do you balance that between maybe some overexcitement, exuberance from media wanting to find some kind of big story at an event like that? Lukes?
Well, I put a lot more stock into an event like that than I do into, let's just say, the NFL Combine or a on-campus pro day type of setting. And the reason why, and it's not the game, it's the week leading up to the game. And it's no different than it is for us with the Under Armour All-America game when you get all of those guys together for a week and you put them on the field and you put them through the paces and you put them through drills and you see them compete and you're spending time with them and you're evaluating their body language and their temperament and how they handle themselves, how they carry themselves. I think that when you put the sport of football into its natural environment, because it's the only sport, Bo, that cannot be duplicated in an off season, right? I can play basketball in January and play basketball in June and be playing the exact same sport. I can do the same thing with golf, tennis, racquetball, gymnastics, no matter what. But when you take football off the field and you put it in shirts and shorts, it's not the same game. And so I think there's a lot of value in the week leading up, whether it's player meetings, player interviews, interactions. The practices are just absolutely critical because you're putting all of these guys together. They've never played with one another. They all probably know each other in some way, shape, or form. They're being taught things at a rapid pace during the week to see what they can handle, what their level of aptitude is, how quickly they process. The entire thing is a week-long test. And to me, there's more value in that than there is in a combine or a pro day setting.
All right, so he's what do you hear? He's flying up the board. The deck has been reshuffled for a couple of reasons. Carson Beck got hurt. He didn't have the year he wanted. He got hurt. He's now staying another year. He'll go to Miami. I think Quinn Ewers was exposed a little bit. You got Cam Ward. Do you feel like this is a Cam Ward, Shedeur, Jaxson Dart race right now?
Yeah, I think so, but I also don't think it's a very good quarterback class. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is a first-round draft choice. I think he's got some traits that are very intriguing and very impressive, but I think he's also got some very, very bad habits. And a lot of that may be because of the team that was around him and him trying to play outside of himself a little bit to elevate the team, and I can understand that. But top to bottom, whether it's, somebody like Curtis Rourke, Jaxson Dart, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, if Dylan Gabriel was bigger, he might be the guy that everybody would be looking towards. Mm. And then you've got people like Seth Hennigan and out of Memphis and some other guys, throughout the process that are going to be there for mid and late rounds and free agent signings. But I think, Cam Ward seems to be the class of this quarterback group. And then I think there's a little bit of a shelf or a cliff. And then everybody else kind of falls into, okay, if he's available, would we take a reach here? Would we go above and beyond? And I just think you got to be really careful with the quarterback position when the class as a whole isn't deemed to be very strong top to bottom.
Is Cam Ward the only surefire first-rounder you think that is worthy of a first-round pick, or would you throw in Dart or anyone else?
I think Cam, I don't know if anybody's surefire. I don't know if I've ever believed in that, but I think Cam Ward's probably the closest to saying, yeah, this guy, if you're talking about the top 32 picks. But I would also, I would look at Jaxson Dart as a guy that's now been through this process in Mobile. He's going to have GMs and scouts and coaches coming through there, sitting him down, putting him on the board. Going to have a pro day. I don't know what he'll do with the combine. but there are going to be plenty of opportunities for him to convince the National Football League that he's one of the top 32 best players in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
And so I think that's available. I think it's realistic. I think it's realistic. I also think that, that what I mentioned with some of the deficiencies of Shedeur Sanders, he's going to have the opportunity as well to impress or to because I think the thing with Shedeur, there was so much going on around him, right, that Jaxson Dart didn't have. Like, Jaxson Dart didn't have the circus, didn't have any of the things going on constantly around him that a lot of people would deem to be potential distractions, things that can get you off your game. Ole Miss was a much better football team than Colorado, so Jaxson Dart had much better players and at certain positions and as a team as a whole than Shedeur Sanders did. So all of those things are going to be scrutinized and they're going to be put under a microscope. And at the end of the day, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
That's right.
Everybody's going to have a feel for this,
yeah.
and a feel for that. And they're going to think, well, this guy would fit in great with what we do. And maybe this guy, we think he's really, really good, but maybe just not quite for us. I mean, the internal conversations that happen in those rooms really divvy into the minute details. And they should, because you're making, a $50 million investment for hopefully what's going to be the face of your franchise for 10 years, and you can't screw it up.
Right. So with the demand, though, at that position, and with it being a thin class, sure looks like it bodes well for Jaxson Dart. Okay, so I'm going to read off ESPN.com. You may have read this. You may have contributed to it. But this was going into the Senior Bowl, Luke's. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show, hanging out with us. Which QB has the best chance to emerge as the class QB3 with a big week? He may have moved up even more than that. But this AFC scout said, and I quote, I want to get your reaction, I'm interested to see him outside of that scheme with Lane Kiffin because everything's so manufactured with where he's supposed to go. I think the traits are good, and there's always one guy that surges up after the all-star circuit. Now, to the scout's point, 34% of Dart's passes this season were deemed as wide-open passing attempts, 11th highest in the FBS among all signal callers. Your thoughts, Luke?
Well, I think there's really one person you can point to that would lead that scout or executive to make the assessment he's made, and his name's Matt Corral. So I think that when you look at the players that have played in that scheme and if or how they have transitioned, clearly you've got Tua. Clearly you've got Jalen Hurts. All right, so there's two right there. But then you're probably going to have a handful here and there that haven't panned out, haven't moved on, no matter how talented they've been. Maybe there's some credence to plays being manufactured, half-field reads, oversimplifying, not putting too much on the quarterback's plate, and does that really develop them and prepare them for what's going to happen at the next level? That's why I think, when you get a guy on the board and you put him up there and you just start pelting him with things, and how he responds is a really critical component to the quarterback evaluation side of things. And because you're trying to test what he knows. And then if he knows it, how quickly can he process it? If he doesn't know it, that's going to tell you something right there as well. And so I think that there's flaws in every assessment of a scheme that a quarterback has come from. Look at the air raid. Like, look at the true air raid. Try to name more than 3 guys, and 2 of them come to mind right now. I'd have to come up with a third. Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff. Try and name more than 3 guys that have come from the true air raid since, 97, when Tim Couch came out of Kentucky, which was 99. Name any that have panned out.
No, Goff and Mahomes.
I'll give you your answer.
Minshew is a really good backup, and he came from the true air raid, and that's it. The Kingsbury. I mean, we had B.J. Simmons on, and he basically said,
Cumbie, Graham Harrell, all of them.
Yeah, he said, look,
Bryce Petty.
he said that Leach in the scheme elevated me, and a bunch of those guys, which is great, but. Now, one thing about Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart, and Shador Sanders that I want to bounce off of you is they've all three played a ton of snaps, which is, we see so many guys leave so quick, so early.
Yeah, very important.
These guys have played a ton of football, and they've been through the battles, both good and bad. So I do think that is, that's an advantage for them. Luke?
Yeah, it is. And, well, with Shador, he's a 3-and-out guy. So, but with Jackson's been well-traveled. He's had to earn it. He went through a phase for a while that, he struggled. I remember that 2020, was it early 2023 or 2022? And I had him against Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And Lane was just furious with him in terms of the decisions he was making, how he was processing, the lack of decision-making, all of these sorts of things. So he's kind of been through it. He's been in a position where, it hasn't always been easy, and he's had to win a job. He's had to beat people out. To me, that's important. I think that builds character. I think it builds intangible traits. At least that nothing's been handed to the guy because he's had to go out and make it happen. To me, that's really important. And I'm not saying that because Shador didn't have to do that Shador is not a guy that everybody should be interested in. But I do think that there's some merit in those areas.
Okay. Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're talking QBs heading to the NFL draft, including Jaxson Dart, who had a spectacular week in Mobile. Weekend for that matter, and people are raving about him and saying that he is now, a lot of guys are saying he's a surefire first-round pick. Kind of feel like he went from a third-round pick to a first-round pick overnight. Let's go here, and then I'll go another direction. What do you love about Jaxson Dart's game, Tom?
I like the riverboat gambler gunslinger mentality. I think that there's something to that that's very legitimate. I think it elevates locker rooms. It allows for confidence amongst teammates to grow. And I think he's got some of that stuff, like how he carries himself, a competitor, tough, will lower his shoulder. He's got locker room winning traits, in my opinion, when it comes to those types of things that you'd love to see your leader have. I think he's got some of that stuff.
All right. What is it that is a concern as part of his game? What's a concern for you?
I think with anything, it probably would be the scheme to some degree in relationship to the amount of guys that have played in that, and then trying to identify what is it that they're either not taught or that they're not getting that's maybe not putting them in position to be NFL ready. And I might be generalizing more here a little bit, but when you just base things off of, kind of off of history and the level of success that guys coming out of that scheme have had, you don't have a ton of sample size to point to.
Okay. He's a big dude. I know that. I was around him.
He's a great-looking kid on the hoof, no doubt.
Yeah, you've called those games. You mentioned Georgia Tech. You called Tulane. You've been down on the field. You've seen him and so on. He is a big guy, 225 plus. We're talking Jaxson Dart. He may have moved into the first round, as Tom Luginbill said 15 minutes ago. It just takes one team, one general manager, and kind of coach owner to jump in. Although he could end up top 5, top 10 with the demand and the thin class. This could just be a Cam, Dart, Shador first round. We'll see.
Well, your hope is that if he goes into the first round, he's in those bottom 10 to 12 picks.
It's a good point because of the team.
He's going to be in a much better position to, number one, maybe not have to play right away. Number two, have people around him that can help him succeed if he did play early.
Yeah. Okay. So from what I'm hearing from you, the bottom line is, can you process fast enough and go through your progressions in the end? Does it just come down to that, basically, if you're a quarterback? Can you process and go through the progressions? Because in high school and college, most of these guys can live off going to their first read. Second max.
Yeah. And listen, it's always about decision making and accuracy. Put them in whatever order that you want to. But how fast things are moving, and I'm not just talking about post-snap, I'm talking about pre-snap as well. Having the knowledge base and the aptitude to be able to identify, get out of a bad play, into the right play, check to this play, get out of this play. They're showing this leverage point on the perimeter. We want to check to this, blah, blah, blah. Play clock's winding down. How quickly can you do that? And then when the ball's snapped, all right, can you produce a positive result? Where do you go with the football? That's where the decision-making post-snap and the accuracy post-snap comes into play. And so I think that is something that is just the aptitude side of it is so critical because, everybody wants to focus on arm strength and speed and all this and that. But you've got to be able to navigate things so quickly, and the game is so much faster at that level. That it puts real challenges on quarterbacks, especially if you've been playing in a system or in a scheme where maybe you're doing a lot of checks to the sideline with the coach, and the coach is giving you the check, and then you're making it at the line of scrimmage, but you're not really deciphering it. It's being deciphered for you. And I think those are things that scouts and coaches get concerned about and start to try to really ask very specific questions when it comes to that part of the game for a quarterback pre-snap.
And, of course, his mobility is going to be an asset for him. He's already proven that he can extend a play and or pull the ball down and go get 10, 12, 15 yards, which is where the game has gone even at the NFL level, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that's where his toughness and his athleticism come into play. But he's got a competitive temperament, which I think is big. He's mentally and physically tough, absolutely paramount for the position. And in that offense, I will say this. He was asked to make a variety of throws, whether it be RPO, whether it be the seam ball, whether it be the deep vertical ball, whether it be balls out to the sideline. I don't think he has an elite NFL arm. I think he has a good enough arm to drive the ball to the sideline at the 15 to 18-yard level to either side of the field, which is plenty, more than enough. You're not seeing a lot of NFL guys have to do that anymore. It's just not the nature of offensive football, but it is a good test for pure arm strength.
Okay, let's switch gears. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. People have cooled on Milroe. Where is Tom Luginbill with Milroe?
I think he is an incredibly gifted athlete who is at his best when he is throwing the deep ball with a clear line of sight or running and creating on his own. I do not think he has progressed in the short and intermediate passing game with decision-making and accuracy the way maybe people would have liked him to over the course of his career in college. I think there's still a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of inaccuracies, but athletically, he's so tempting because he's just elite. I mean, he can be talked about from a run standpoint in the Lamar Jackson conversations. Is he even in the same area code as a passer? Not right now, not in my opinion, not on the nuanced level of passing. But people are going to be intrigued by him because he's so athletic and he's so big and he's so explosive that it carries weight,
Mm-hmm. All right. Returning SEC QBs, some that started, some that did not. Who are you the highest on? Nussmeier, Lagway, Arch, someone else? What direction would you go, Tom Luginbill?
I think the ceiling for Lagway and Manning is enormous. We haven't even scratched the surface of what those two kids are capable of. I've talked to you about this before, I love the path of development that the Mannings chose to take as opposed to being thrown into the fire and having to live up to that billing. Instead, you learn, you get bigger, you grow, you mature, you understand the game more, things start to slow down. You haven't been beat up mentally because you weren't ready for the jump. I mean, all of those things I think are going to be huge positives for Arch. And we just saw a sampling of the problem that DJ Lagway is going to be in college football. I mean, he is an absolute problem. And really, to be honest with you, he saved their season, and he probably saved their coach's job.
Yeah.
And then you got to credit
on
the
one
coaches.
leg.
Absolutely. And then you got to credit the coaches, because that was one of the most tampered with and interfered with recruits. People don't realize he was committed to Florida for well over a year, and he never deviated. He never wavered, and he didn't while he was at Florida either. So credit the coaches for being able to keep him there and being able to put this thing together. I do think Garrett Nussmeier is really good for a lot of the same reasons I mentioned with Jaxson Dart. I don't think his ceiling is as high, because he's not going to physically wow you with height, weight, speed, arm strength. To me, he's slightly bigger, slightly more athletic, slightly stronger arm Brock Purdy.
Oh, wow. Okay. I like that.
And so,
yeah.
But I like him, and I like his riverboat mentality. And the other thing I like, we talked about this earlier, is that's a kid that could have transferred not once, not twice, but probably 3 times, and he never did.
Yes.
And he, too, now is going to be older and have played a ton of football and will be more NFL ready as a result. And he bided his time, and he earned his way, and it's paying off for him.
I agree. All right, we'll leave it there. And you're right on Lagway. I mean, he's from Texas, I think, and Florida wasn't winning, and yet he stayed with that commitment for a year or a year plus, like you were referencing. I love him as a player. Hey, thanks for doing this with your schedule. We really appreciate it, man.
You bet, man. Have a great rest of the week.
All right, Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. We did 20 minutes on Jaxson Dart, who looks like he is flown out of the 3rd round, may have flown out of the 2nd round, and may be the 2nd quarterback picked. But I don't know. He may leapfrog Cam Ward, but he may be the 2nd quarterback picked behind Cam Ward. Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart, Shedeur Sanders. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Jackson Meadows. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're brought to you by RPT and RicksProTruck.com.